I'm willing to yield to the senator from Bicol.
I am in full support of this bill, as it is one of those laws that really need to be updated to adjust to the realities of the modern times, particularly advanced communications and internet technology, internet and communications technology. So just very few questions, essentially clarificatory. Does a good sponsor know of any government body or agency that recognizes or accredits members of media? Because I take note of the reality that there is no official accreditation of journalists at present. As long as a person is accredited by a print, broadcast, or internet news media entity, then he or she will be covered by the privilege when circumstances warrant under this proposed bill. And we note that during the public hearing held for this bill, the response, I think, of Senator Soto is that if a news outfit is legitimate, then it must be registered in the SEC or some other organization like the National Press Club or the Philippine Press Institute. But there seems to be no government body or agency that would accredit members. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. President, you are correct. There's no official government agency that accredits journalists. However, there are private organizations like the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines, the Philippine Press Club, and the Publishers Association of the Philippines, and many others that may have their own registrations with the SEC.
And based on our research, Mr. President, esteemed colleague, there was a bill filed by former Senator Jinggoy Estrada during the 16th Congress. This is supposed to be the Magna Carta for journalists that seeks to create the Philippine Council for Journalists, mandated to accredit journalists and produce a database or directory of accredited journalists from both print and broadcast media. And I think this bill also institutes a licensure examination for journalists. My question is the good sponsor open to considering a similar bill, perhaps a separate bill, separate from the Soto or Shield law?
Yes, Mr. President, we're just being careful and towing the line also because we want to make sure that our journalists maintain their freedom and their independence. But if the bill is filed, we can certainly ascertain the advantages of that for the protection also of the journalists. I mean, they may not necessarily be compelled to register, but the government can offer them certain recognition so that they will have protections also under the law.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wish to be clarified, Madam Sponsor, as to whether blogs or bloggers are indeed covered in the bill.
Yes, if the blog or the blogger in the blog is a part of an organization that's recognized, for example, that's big enough like the NUJP, as I mentioned, or the Philippine Press Association, or even the Publishers Association. Well, they're identifiable persons, and if they're recognized as journalists even by their audience. I mean, part of this also is your free speech, to be able to say what you have to say, but as you know, we had to amend this bill to include not just print, but television as well as television and internet because of the technology change. So now, blogs are actually part of the forum where journalists freely say what they need to say or report.
And still in relation to that, Madam Sponsor, uh, is the proposed measure, well, you just mentioned that blogs and bloggers are covered by this bill, and I think during the discussion in the course of the committee hearings, that was the consensus, that writers of blogs can be considered or may be covered, as they may be considered as a journalist or writers of opinion or writer of news for mass circulation through the internet, as long as they represent a legitimate media entity such as Rappler.
Yes, actually, Mr. President, I'd also like to bring up the case with regards to Emil Jorado, and the Supreme Court held that RA 53 confers no immunity from prosecution for libel or for other sanction under law. It only gives the journalist the right to refuse to reveal any source related in confidence. So they have the right to refuse related to them in confidence, but if it's libelous, they're still not immune from suit.
It's still the very context, actually, of the Soto or Shield law.
Absolutely.
But
yeah,
I
yes.
think insofar as blogs and bloggers are concerned, especially those that do not seem to represent or be part of a legitimate entity, I think we should have stricter supervision
Yes.
and regulation.
Yes, I agree, Mr. President.
There are blogs with high online traffic which are not actually recognized or accredited by a legitimate news media entity. Bloggers like the Mocha Uson, published via Facebook, but don't get me wrong. I don't read the Mocha Uson blog. Gawa lang po ito ng staff ko. So is she covered by the Shield law? And other bloggers like Joe America, Raisa, Robles. So while I see the point that this measure or the proposed amendments to the Shield or Soto bill would or should cover also blogs and bloggers, there ought to be some special provisions in relation to them for stricter regulation.
Yes, actually, Mr. President, the point of the law is to protect the source. If they cannot present their source, then they have to prove the truthfulness of their statements. Sometimes the source will give you the lead, but it is really up to you to point to the facts that will legitimize the information you receive from a source. Now, I also agree that we need to be able to weed out the irresponsible ones and the ones that are malicious. And so perhaps during the period of amendment, we can narrow down all of these safeguards and include it in the provision, because again, we have to toe the line and we have to be very careful that we don't stifle freedom of expression, but we also have to uphold responsibility among writers, be they bloggers, especially when they are assassinating the character of a person, if it's not truthful. So, yes, we will take this into account in the period of amendment, Mr. President.
And certainly fake news are not covered.
Yes, and we're going to have a
news.
hearing on that, Mr. President, because, you know, that's precisely the point. I mean, you're a journalist. You have to uphold a certain standard. If you're just rumor mongering, then that's not really, I don't think it should be considered
Thank
part
you,
of this bill.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
President. That would be all. Thank you to the distinguished
Before
sponsor.
we move on, the
Thank
Chair would
you.
like to interject, Madam Sponsor. In this day and age of social media, I hope that a lot social media practitioners have no accountability. I hope that you'll take that into consideration in your amendments as compared to the mainstream media, which have at least they have their accountability.
I know they have, yes, Mr. President, you're right. At least the mainstream media that actually has a reputation to uphold files the necessary permits and taxes, so therefore they have certain responsibility, is our source for reliable media now. I mean, but they don't have a monopoly of that either. But to a degree, there will be some sort of accreditation which shall be affected by the media outlets and practitioners themselves. It's almost like a self-regulation, Mr. President. I think that they have to be able to police their ranks, to be able also to enjoy some sort of a protection under the law. The media has been effective in regulating themselves, maybe not as much as we would want them to be, but at least they should be encouraged towards that. They have also actively campaigned against fake news because such belittles and mocks the effort and time a journalist spends vetting his or her sources. We should also note that fake news sites usually just aggregate content from legitimate news sites and distort the content to propagate information that will either fit their political agenda or spread misinformation. Thus, they usually have no sources to protect.
All right.